We're all set to go. So welcome to the last Tuesday set of meetings for the Washington County Board of Commissioners. This is our work session. This is Chair Catherine Harrington. We have Commissioner Fye joining us in our hybrid model by Zoom. And here in the room, we have the rest of the commission, Commissioner Roy Rogers, Commissioner Pam Trees, and Commissioner Jerry Willey. First item on the agenda is board and leadership communication. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So last week, I attended the ERMDAC meeting, and the main topic was getting our first look at the 2023 pedestrian and biking improvements proposal list. Ooh. So that was interesting, and it was cut and sorted all different ways. So it was a data person's heaven. So that was very interesting. But as you know, it continues to narrow down. I attended the Planning Commission recognition event. That was really cool, and I was really pleased that all of us were there.
That was fun.
That was really cool. So
thank you, staff.
Yeah, it was great. And I am going to miss both Matt and Jeff. I think that they both have communicated with them on several issues, and they're both great, but I still have their number in my phone. So I kept that.
For the sage advice.
Yes.
Sorry, I shouldn't be interrupting you. Okay. I just share the same sentiments.
I attended the Homeless Plan Advisory Committee, and it was really a planning session for the year ahead and the topics that we want to focus on and how we want to prioritize those things. Those topics included housing, health system integration, and engaging and supporting landlords, for example. I attended the Hack Forum on Friday last week, and that was really good. And I think it was testament to the amazing staff we have here. So I enjoyed attending that, and listening to Josh Lehner is always interesting and insightful. Not always comforting, but it's interesting. So then I attended the RDPO meeting. We nominated Mayor Ann McCurney Ogle as chair again, and Commissioner Margaret Magruder to be vice chair. We also voted on the 23-24 budget, which included a small increase to our county's contribution. And I discussed this with John Wheeler. He felt comfortable, and it is budgeted for it. I mentioned it to Tanya as well, so I'm comfortable with that. Yesterday, I had an interesting meeting. It was supposed to originally be with the Congresswoman Bonamici, and mostly focused on CHIPS, just listening to her position and what's going on. Since she's still recovering from her accident, I met with Sarah and Kelsey from her office, but I'm always confident in meeting with Sarah and Kelsey that it's like meeting with the Congresswoman. They're great staff. It was a good conversation about the CHIPS Act and the Semiconductor Task Force. The Congresswoman, sees this act as a huge opportunity for the state and the country. It's significant for jobs and workforce, and she's hopeful that Oregon comes together to put together a strong incentive package sooner than later to take advantage of the NOFO that's coming out in February. Congresswoman Bonamici has a long history in workforce development, in education, science, technology, and arts in relationship to STEAM. So this is really consistent with what her goals have been all along. She has put a lot of work into this, and it was interesting to hear the impact of the work. I do want to say that their office is light on the details about what the NOFO package should or what the package response should include. Since the Department of Commerce is a bit tight-lipped, but they really see this as a plussing up of the current semiconductor industry that's already here in Oregon, and particularly our county, tapping into the workforce that we have. She's eager to see a package come out of the state legislature to get Oregon well positioned to be competitive for federal funds. by the way, Sarah and Kelsey also extended the opportunity to talk with any other commissioners if you would like. So that it was a good opportunity to hear the perspective from the federal side, and I appreciated that. This week, I've got Central Cultural Gala that's coming up. I'm filming a video for that. The MPAC meeting is tomorrow night, and I've shared with you what the topics are. I did get a little bit of feedback from Chair Harrington about the garbage and recycling piece and what's happened in the past here in Cornelius, those areas. So I appreciate that. If there's any other feedback that you would like to provide me, please feel free. This week, I also have the PAB and the Home and CDBG sponsor presentations workshop, and that'll be, I think, all day, all morning and into the afternoon on Thursday. Then I have the AOC Budget and Finance Committee coming up, and I believe we're going to be reviewing a proposed letter that Chair is putting forward for AOC. So that's my report.
Based on something you mentioned, one thing that I need to get a little clearer on, especially given my representing the board at the Metro SHS Oversight Committee, which is mostly listening, and then the Tri-County Planning Body, plus the work that we do as the Housing Authority Board of Directors. I'm trying to affordable housing and homelessness is very integrated. So I'm trying to get clear in my mind and in my understanding, the Housing Advisory Council and the Homeless Plan Advisory Committee. So Daniel, if you can help me come back to that, that would be helpful.
I'd appreciate being involved in that conversation as well. And I think it's a matter.
Do you understand it? You
well, no, I'd like to be involved. And I think everybody's out there doing great work. I'd just like to see what the lanes are and who's in what lane and what, so I can support effectively.
And I think Ms. Angie, and we could certainly talk about this more in a roundtable. One thing that it came out of the HAC meeting on Friday, or as my going into it, is the Housing Advisory Council advises the board and staff. And I don't have any recollection of receiving their advisement. Now, I have a crummy memory these days. So I'm just trying to be clearer. We have so many boards and commissions. How do we get clear on that? So it's just an example. Who's next?
Are you next?
We have three of you. Who's next?
Sure. I'll do
Very
that.
good.
Listen, Nafisa, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I can jump in,
Okay,
Commissioner
why
Willa.
don't you
Thank
go
you.
ahead?
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad we have this opportunity to join online and in person. So I think I communicated that I will be virtual this afternoon. I think I send the right email to everyone. If I think I forgot our board clerk, so sorry, Kevin, but you were on top of it, and I think so I appreciate this opportunity. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and commissioners and Ms. Tanya and Mr. Tom. I will be brief in my updates and just highlight one topic. Transportation seems to be the big topic that's occupying most of my time for this week, last week, and onward. I'll start with JPAC. Last week we had JPAC meeting, and in terms of the topics, there were a lot of informational topics. We talked about the JPAC work plan, the major work items that are going to be coming to JPAC in 2023. And it was just the informational discussion, what's missing. We talked about the regional mobility pricing project that wasn't listed and highlighted that, and Metro provided feedback and will be lifted and elevated throughout JPAC conversations. The other informational item on JPAC I think I shared the agenda last week with you all, but quickly as an overview, it was a report around equitable transportation funding research project findings. And this was informational only. The staff shared the report that described state and local funding sources for transportation and the assessment that was done in which they are equitable. I think as our staff and others at JPAC discussed, it was very well recognized that the report was very thorough and well documented. It listed next steps in terms of leaders from around the region using these findings from the report to inform our own policies and then how this report will be used throughout the development of the 2023 RTP and future RTPs. I don't have anything to report on that agenda item other than to say it's worth reading and it's worth just considering some of the findings. One thing that our staff and myself agreed and we lifted at the JPAC level table was how the finding wasn't clear, how it will be included in the RTP, and how Metro Policies doesn't dictate how ODOT sets its DMV fees. So we lifted that and talked with Metro staff if the intent for the report is as a lobbying guide for state and federal. And how, if that's the case, it should be clarified. So that was another informational item. Another topic that was just a discussion among JPAC was, and many of you are familiar, and I think I provided many updates and you've seen, and this has been topics for both WCCC and JPAC, is the agenda item around high capacity transit strategy update and corridor investment readiness tiers. I won't bore you and repeat what I've said in the previous updates, but to say this was really a robust conversations and in both members from Washington County really elevated some of the corridors that are really tier 1 for us, but in the report is documented as tier 4 and how we really need to reconsider how we tiered some of these investments. And just two corridors that we uplifted was the Amber Glen streetcar proposed by the Hillsborough and which was in the 2018 RTP and how it should be considered in this. And then obviously Highway 99. So that was the two areas that we listed. Other than that, the report was really it's a good start to sum it up. And then one other topic that I, in my opinion, is to be continued, and it's not a finished discussion yet, but it was really also another good start discussion. At JPAC level conversation was the carbon reduction program introduction and proposal. And this was just informational and a discussion, but Metro staff are looking for input to guide the development of a proposal to allocate 18 million in funds from the federal carbon reduction program to come back to, I think our transportation staff can correct, but around February and March. So sometime soon. And the funds needs to be obligated for the next 4 years. So I think more to come. I think there's a lot of proposals that were being suggested. Transit, and then active transportation, and then intelligence transportation is the other areas, smart strategy investments, those 3 areas, but more discussions to be had. And in my opinion, I don't think we really got into it. The heart of we need more robust conversation, but as our board, one thing that I want to highlight about this discussion that we had at JPAC is we presented the idea that while recognizing that JPAC does not need to identify a project, we didn't need to identify projects right at that moment. We elevated that we potentially might need about $500,000 to move towards Fano Creek Trail. So, and the idea, I think one of the Metro Councilor, Christine Lewis, spoke really well around the need for bike and walk options. So I think it was a perfect time to plug in Fano Creek at that moment and just lift it. So I'll keep you posted what comes out of it. But it would be really an added value if we could get more, just the 500 we need for Fano Creek. And then any questions on that? Okay,
Not that I can see.
thank you, Chair. And then the other topic I want to move on to is yesterday we had our fourth or fifth meeting around the Regional Tolling Advisory Committee, RTAC, yesterday. Great meeting, as always. One of the big things that we still haven't decided is the charter. I know I've been bringing to our meetings that the charter isn't final. I think the members are really still interested in wordsmithing and just you know fine tuning more in terms of a language perspective. So we have not finalized our charter, but the group was reminded. I think one of the quotes that I heard yesterday is, "Don't let perfect be the enemy of good," something along those lines. And so hopefully, I say this with a smile on my face, next month which is February 27th, the next meeting for the RTAC, we'll be finalizing the that charter, and I'll share the final agenda charter with our board, and that way it can be a guiding force for us in terms of where that committee is going, what the committee is going to accomplish, and sort of track the number of advices and we're given to director of ODOT. One of the other big agenda item for the RTAC committee was cooperative agreement for the regional mobility pricing project. And it was really, a good discussion. We had Federal Highway Nathaniel Price with FHWA do the presentation, and he talked about the cooperative agreement, the purpose of it, how long is it, and who fills it out, and where the responsibility lies in terms of submission. And he talked about the revenue is used, like what the purpose of the revenue is and how it's supposed to be for operation cost of the facility versus so the I realized that was confusing. So let me pause for a second and say revenue is used first for operation cost of the facility in the cooperative agreement. And then the second part of the revenue use is for Title 23 and Title 23 projects that are eligible. And then also the state law is at play. So it will be for projects under Title 23, which includes transit. So we'll see what the investments looks like around public transportations. I made a request. I think I've been sort of keeping track of a lot of questions in my head that I have about tolling and questions that I've got from folks, and made a request to ODOT to put together an FAQ around some of these questions. I won't bore you. I plan to send an email to ODOT, and after I do that, I'll share the FAQ. It should be coming, and it will be distributed. So those are those questions I won't go through in our meeting. And then the last thing that we talked about, we had ODOT Director of Finance come and talk about statewide rule advisory committee. This is the advisory committee statewide that will be talking about toll operations and rate setting. Those are the two things that this group is going to be responsible for. They're not going to be responsible for input or how we apply tolls and where and how we allocate the revenue from tolls. So this specifically will be about rate setting and then the operation piece of the tolling. Great news for Washington County is that I will be representing us as a Washington County and also the regional toll advisory committee. So I'll be a representative representing that committee, the RTAC, sitting on this rulemaking advisory committee. And I'll keep you posted. This will be my first time participating in rulemaking. We had a really robust conversations about this committee and what it entails and how ODOT selected folks to participate. We had a really good conversations, and folks like Metro President Lynn Peterson offered assistance to Washington County in terms of administratively if we need it. But it sounds like it's a big endeavor, but I think we are geared, and Chris was in the room. Chris Steffenbach was in the room yesterday listening, so I'll keep you posted. And
So I think you better check with Ms. Angie to see if there is staff capacity to staff you here at Washington County. You're getting
Oh.
selected doesn't mean an automatic yes for Washington County staffing. So please follow up with Ms. Angie offline.
Chair Harrington, Angie and I, Ms. Angie and I are connected this afternoon earlier, so she's well aware and to be continued with this conversation. So thank you for
Exactly.
that plug. But yeah, I think we beat you to that punch today. Doesn't happen often, but we did. So, and with that, I turn it back to you, Chair Harrington.
I guess I better wear some face masks around the season.
I didn't mean it violently like that.
So certainly a lot of activity going on there. Please do let us know when there are milestones so that we can provide advisement from the board. Otherwise, have fun with all that activity.
Absolutely, Chair.
Commissioner Treese signaled that she had a couple of things she forgot. to mention.
Thank you.
Redo. How could you forget?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I just wanted to explain why the executive session today was taken off the agenda. That was the executive session to discuss performance, Mr. Carr's performance review. Our consultant on that project is very ill, and she's been sick for a week plus, and so we have postponed this to February 21st, I believe. I think that's the day.
Thank you for your good graces in
Yes.
allowing us that
Yeah.
flexibility.
And
the second major flexible step you've.
It does violate my contract, but I promise not to sue. Then I'd have to defend.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Carr.
And whatever pay reduction we recommend it.
Thank you.
I just wanted
It'll
to,
be retroactive for you, but not against us. How's that?
I like that.
I just wanted to make sure that you all knew what was going on, and this is, it's unavoidable, and I'm very sorry, and we really wish Michelle Rios the very best.
So now we know that we're going to have a catastrophic event on whatever that day is.
Probably.
February.
I'm very sorry.
Major blizzard hits the Northwest.
And the other thing is I wanted to encourage you to provide me feedback on the letter that I sent to you, the compensation letter. I intend to put that into the consent agenda as we've done previously for the next board meeting. So thank you.
I'll say to that, thank you for putting that together. I'm really pleased with it and have no additional changes. I can't remember if we highlighted this in the actual review, but I really appreciate, Ms. Angie, how you help us on the board have good information for our various topics and really fruitful policy level conversation. I mean, we had it with Time, Place, and Manner last week. Commissioner Willie and I, serving on the ARPA steering committee, had a really good session with staff to help form information that's coming to us February 6th, I think. And she just does stellar work.
So I think Commissioner Fai has her hand up.
Thank you, Commissioner Treese. I just wanted to just say that I will be off camera most of our meeting today. Just wanted to give that heads up.
Thank you.
So,
If you-
Commissioner Willie,
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you, Pam, for doing something that I absolutely despise doing, which is writing up reviews and evaluations and those kinds of things. So thank you for taking that responsibility on. And you're doing such a great job. I recommend we extend our contract for at least 4 more years.
My contract.
Your contract, yeah.
Well, it's nice to be able to work with such great performers.
I'm happy to return to team of 2 next year.
Anyway, yeah, last week we had the GPI board meeting, and probably one of the top things that I'm gonna have a meeting with Monique, the executive director, I think that's her title. Next week as well, to follow up on some things. They have budget, they presented their budget, and it's a pretty aggressive budget, so I want to find out some more information about that. But it's always good, quite frankly, to just set in on those. That's mostly Portland centric board that meets there, and it's all on Zoom, so it's easy to do that.
When you say it's an aggressive budget, does that mean there are aggressive membership fees?
They haven't pointed to that yet. They
Ah.
just put together some numbers. It's not too different than the AOC.
Yeah, I
So,
know.
they,
These member organizations are sucking the budget out of us.
well, and they have, and they've hired a consultant to help them with this, and
Yeah.
let's see. The term that they used was reclaiming Portland narrative. So we'll see exactly what that means and what they can do. So anyway, I'll have that meeting next week. I did have a meeting with Jessica Vega Peterson, Multnomah County Chair. And it was nice. Pam was supposed to join me and could not because she was locked in her home.
No.
Because people taking down trees and blocking the streets and things like that. So it was good. I told JVP that I particularly appreciate it because then I got to talk for 30 minutes versus listening to Pam ask all the questions. But and then we did talk about the earthquake ready Burnside Bridge project and
Yeah.
and some other
Did you
things.
guys get all the handouts on that? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, you got them, so I don't need
Mhm.
to scan them and send them. Great.
Yeah, but that was a good meeting. I was particularly pleased that she took the opportunity to come out and meet with a number of us. So that was good. I too went to the Planning Commission recognition event. It was very good, and it was very nice that all 5 of us were there. And I think both the commissioners appreciated the fact that we were there. So that was good. The Hack Forum, of course, several of us were at the Hack Forum, and that's always really informative to me because I don't sit on that committee. And so it's a good way to hear, panel discussion and an update on all of that. So I appreciated that forum particularly. The Northwest Broadband Advisory Team, BAT. Also, Colpac has been working with them, of course, on our rural broadband project. We've hired a contract consultant, Stone Ventures, that will help us with, taking the next step on this. We've ran into some issues with the private sector, trying to get ahead of us, and they act much faster than we do in government. So we're going to be talking to them and of course, working with the state broadband office to move ahead on this and get some available federal money and be ready for that.
Could I
Yes.
highlight,
Mhm.
Commissioner Willie and I talked about this today in our monthly one-on-one, and Megan's gonna try and corral us and some staff information that's underway. And we've currently penciled that in for the June roundtable.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Also, the AVSAC, the Aging Veterans Committee, we met with them last week. They they talked about, this year was the first time since 2019 because of COVID that they had what they called their annual county stand down, and it's a veterans event to invite. It was held out at a church in Hillsborough, and we had vendors there. We had some clothing there for those who needed to upgrade a little bit for their job interviews. And it was just a really, really well attended event. There was 82, I think is my number. 82 veterans attended that, and we're hoping to significantly increase that again next year. But it was a great event, had good information on it. I appreciated that. The Public Safety Committee, we appointed Todd Schaefer again as chair of that. Rachel Schutz, who will be vice chair. She is the executive director of the Family Justice Center. And then, of course, Aaron Doyle gave a great legislative update. And those are always very informational and entertaining meetings. So good job on those, Aaron. You do a good job of staffing those. So good job. Attended the Cornelius Booster Club yesterday. Haven't had that opportunity either for about 3 years. It's a good group, about 16 or 18 folks out there. The mayor of Cornelius, the new city manager, Peter Brandom, both attended it, had a good conversation about a little bit about time, place, and manner. But mostly it was about the Council Creek Trail. It was about the and some of the things, the industrial land ask that Cornelius is moving towards, and just some good things about that. So we had good conversation about what the county is doing and how we can help, certainly, the city of Cornelius. And then lastly, it was the Council Creek Trail. That was a meeting I had last night. We're moving ahead. We're going to try and, at the next meeting, we're going to identify the preferred route. And if you remember, it's a 60-foot wide right-of-way, railway, gonna convert from rail to trail. And there's 3 variations, 3 alternatives, but as in anything else, and we see this a lot on the Salmonberry Trail, it lays dormant for a while and people seem to think that's their spot. So they move their backyard fences back there. They put some nice sheds back there. They might even put a road in here and there, whatever. And so we have lots of right-of-way encroachments. And so if we pick the path of where the rail is and right down the middle, we're probably going to be okay for the first one. And then looking forward to many years from now, we might be able to convert that to a light rail. And then, of course, we'd have to move the trail and all those things. But that's 25 years down the road. I think the RTP was, it's going to come back on 2045, HCT, I'm sorry. And so, yeah, but it's good. We're moving ahead. We've got money to do this, but it's still not going to get done until 2029. Slow process, but
Takes time to get all the money.
it's a good project, though, I tell you. And we are very fortunate. We have enough money to get this started and get the ball rolling. So upcoming is tomorrow, I'm going to the workforce breakfast and panel discussion. I have a CPO that's reactivating, CPO 12F in
Oh,
Forest
the
Grove.
Fern Hill. Good,
Yeah. So I'm going to a reactivation meeting tomorrow night for that. WEA forum on West Side Real Estate Insights, got a meeting with the fire chief of Gaston. And then final interviews for the juvenile services director on Friday. Lots of good stuff going. So, hey, sorry, Roy. Go.
All right, I'll make mine really fast after listening to all of yours. Had a nice meeting with our chair. Last Wednesday, I believe it was. I enjoyed that. But one of the things I've always thought is you don't look at the horizon, you try to look at over the top. I guess you reach a certain age in life and you start doing that, and have 3 big items we chatted about, and I won't bring those up now because we can talk about them in the future. I think there's some major course issues that we all ought to look at as a board. I went to the WEA legislative meeting. It was interesting to hear their thoughts that legislators had in regard to gain share and about the CHIPS Act. And I think it'll be some education on our part to tell them what we really need to have some of those things accomplished. I had the good fortune of, they used one of my questions, which had to do with that, and didn't really get a succinct answer. I guess I felt a little bit like, I guess people feel like sometimes when they talk to us, that they ask something that they think is pretty focused, and you get this all around the barn kind of answer, and you kind of go, well, it's,
Or you
Not
just
a-
ask them yes or no questions.
yeah.
Would you support this?
Yeah. Would you support supersiding a location as well as funds to the county to do the infrastructure?
Yeah.
That was the question.
Yeah.
That was the question. That was pretty specific.
Yeah,
So,
it
That's a
was.
yes or no.
yeah.
Was presented.
So
What it was.
Could you make sure to have a follow-up conversation with Aaron Doyle?
Of course.
So that we can make sure we all
Mhm.
double back in terms of the strategy
Of
for
course.
telling the county's story and what it's
Was
gonna
there,
take.
I think, was it?
Happy to do that.
Oh, great.
Also, had on Friday, a little 2017 meeting. The only thing you ought to know is that I listened because I have one tomorrow afternoon. I'm on the subcommittee of R1 Act and looking at all of the proposals. And we've got 3 of them, as you know, from the county. And it's a little hard not to be supportive of our own and then try to act like you're neutral as well. But they didn't prioritize. And that was disappointing at the 2017 meeting. And it's unfortunate because when you have $11-12 million in projects and you're only going to get about 8, probably, it'd be nice to say what you don't have to you can support them all, but kind of say, well, these are our highs and lows. But that didn't happen.
You mean the House Bill 2017 Transit
Yes,
Committee?
I'm sorry. Yes, I could have been more specific. That's correct. WA meeting tomorrow morning. That I told you about the stiff subcommittee of R1 Act tomorrow afternoon. Had a nice conversation with Greg. Had some follow-up, and I've gotten more questions when you make your presentation today. I have a thought on how we might do that, and I won't talk about where we spend our Saturdays because I'll let the chair. do that.
Okay.
But, it was a very nice meeting with a bunch of people at a place called Durham, which I won't tell you what's out there. I'll leave the excitement to her.
Yeah, that mayor is somewhat suspect there.
It wasn't at the city hall. So that's it.
Okay, well, I think we're gonna need on board and leadership communication and formal agenda item discussion, just a reminder, 5 minutes per. So I will prioritize what I was going to report out and just leave it at, as Commissioner Rogers mentioned, there were 2 CWS essentials and tour sessions, one Thursday night and one Saturday. The one Thursday night had Cornelius Mayor Jeff Delane, a CWAC member Mark Farrar, Tualatin City Councilor Bridget Brooks, Banks Mayor Stephanie Jones, Forest Grove Mayor Melinda Wenzel, and one of our own policy assistants, Megan McKibben. Saturday, we had Elliot Lissac of TVWD's board. Interesting guy. Laura Petrie from the King City City Council, Marcia Kirk and Nikki Walters from the Banks City Council, Jiraj Singh from the Tigard City Council, Yi Kang Hu of the Tigard City Council, the City Council President, and Ramesh Krishnamurthy from the TVWD board. So we had a fun tour of the lab. I told my husband I need to get one of those 30-second dance party buttons.
I heard about that.
Trouble, what happens in a lab tour stays in a lab tour. But we had just as much fun on the Durham treatment plant tour. We had a flock dance. So me and my flock best friend buddies. Anyway, uh, just a little bit of color amongst my other boring stuff. Synced up with Taylor Smiley Wolf of the governor's staff on the governor's homeless executive orders. And really the only thing they've done other than trying to get their own house going, because there's a lot to building up a new governor's staff and kicking off a new state legislature and all that jazz, is they started convening our emergency managers. But they're going to get to some better communication here this week and next. So one thing that I think they also need to adjust to is that just engaging the emergency managers does not engage the elected officials, because while the emergency manager in Multnomah County reports to the county chair, the emergency manager here doesn't. So strengthening on all sides, more to come. The big item of the day is the draft letter to AOC on our dues. Remember, we talked last week and agreed that we would not be funding our full general fund dues invoiced, but pay a portion 4% higher than last year's. I took the opportunity to follow up with the Tri-County chairs. Right now, Jessica Vega Peterson is looking at the information with her finance staff. What bothers her and the county commissioners there is that the current fee structure and the current operations is not benefiting for all counties. So I think that's a phrase we might put into the letter. Beyond that, Commissioner Treese has shared with me some Scribner items. Are you all okay with approving the letter?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. She and I, as she mentioned, we have that Budget and Finance Committee. Multnomah County has been paying for some number of years on a quarterly basis instead of paying all at once. So we may look at that as well, because I think if we don't get some satisfaction by the end of this fiscal year, that I think we're going to have, before the end of this fiscal year, we're going to have some more discussion. The Clackamas, so Commissioner Smith was also proposing to her.
Chair Smith.
Thank you. Chair Smith was proposing to her board this morning also that 4%. Daniel touched bases. They discussed it today, and they have pretty much a new board. And you know, Paul Savis, who's been a rep for Clackamas County, hasn't shown up to anything in a year either. And Martha Schrader's attendance has been pretty spotty as well. So apparently they must have had a most productive discussion today, because they decided to pay their full dues.
They did.
Whoa.
Apparently so. So that's all I know thus far. So we'll see what happens there. So maybe they're going to go all in gun ho and have more of their new members participating on steering committees and move into leadership.
Are there, was that a work session discussion?
For them?
Yeah.
I believe so.
And it is, Kevin would know, are those filmed? Videotaped? I'd just like to listen.
They should be audio and video recorded now.
Okay, thank you.
Time, place, and manner. I think we should just give you a heads up. Based on feedback and a one-on-one I had with staff on Monday, they were there was an expression that they were a little disappointed that we weren't clearer. I went back and rewatched the video right before or this afternoon. And I think we gave pretty clear direction that we do want the development of an ordinance. We summarized various sensitive areas where we want to make sure that it's camping is excluded from those areas. And I thought you did a good job in your wrap up, Ms. Angie, of taking our discussion and how we wanted to have a first draft ordinance for our further clarity plus some maps. So thank you for that. And then you brought our attention back to the timeline. So I think what, in summary, what it sounded like is we just don't want to see the community listening sessions until after we have that next touch point with a work session with draft proposal review, so that we're really clear on what are we proposing. So, but certainly the community can meet with partner meetings or key stakeholders to gather more information. But until we have some draft proposal, we don't have something to convene on. So, and I thought that's what you summarized as well. So I wanted to highlight that. So, I appreciate that government relations is really stepping up and getting bill tracker going. I know I need to make sure I allow more time to review that. And just for the sake of time, I want to move forward with leadership communication and
I'll keep it brief. Thank you, Chair and Board. First, I want to announce a key milestone. Washington County Supportive Housing Services Program achieved an important milestone this month. We have officially housed 1,000 people.
All right.
Since our launch in 2021, SHS has been prioritizing the Regional Long-Term Rental Assistance, RLRA program, and housing support, such as housing case managers and outreach workers, to connect people facing houselessness with available resources. The county has also expanded its shelter options to 320 beds, including year-round, temporary, and severe weather shelters. The SHS system overall goal is to provide 1,650 supportive housing placements using long-term rental assistance and 250 year-round shelter beds. At full capacity, this will represent $33 million in program funds between rental assistance and ongoing case management support. Our communications team is working on pushing this information out to the community. So I just wanted to share, sometimes we're focusing on what more that we need to do, and to take a step back and look at where we've been and the progress we've made is incredibly important. So I appreciate the board's leadership in this and just the hard work of staff and our community partners in reaching this important milestone.
If I could ask, could someone in the SHS department kind of send us an email with that snapshot of statistics? Is that in here?
It's not written, but I'll provide that in an update email. In addition to my next update, Chair, thank you for raising the governor's declaration and communications with the state. I will be providing a follow-up written memo from John Wheeler to your board. In conjunction, I'll include it with this SHS overview. I think what's important to note, if the board may recall, Mr. Wheeler was present at your last Tuesday's board session and said it was an introductory meeting with the state. It was a 30-minute meeting, so it was very high level. So getting communications down, is incredibly important as we move forward. John will be, through Aaron Calvert, sending your board anytime there are meetings upcoming, just an email with what the status is, since this is unfolding and communications aren't clearly connecting in points that are desired. Facility condition index. As you're aware, we are in the process of conducting a Washington County Facility Condition Index process, and we have contracted with the firm CBRE. I'm excited to share that the consultants were on site last week, so we're making progress, and they conducted the first physical inspections of the jail, law enforcement center, justice services building, Service Center East, and the animal shelter. While we're just in the start of this process, we are looking to schedule time with your board in Q4 of 2023 to report out on the full findings and reports of the facilities condition index at the county. I also want to share a retirement announcement. Comey Calabar has announced his retirement. It will be effective once we fill the assistant director positions and replace Comey's position. Initially, he had hoped to retire in May, but with the transitions, really appreciate Comey's leadership and commitment to helping through these transitions. He will be taking some time off for vacations, and he has a new grandbaby.
Oh,
So focusing on family during this time. So
thank you, Comey.
thank you, Comey. Yes.
Come on board. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, Comey, and congratulations.
So
Boy, it's a loss.
yeah. So we are in the process, in essence, of rebuilding and reestablishing a department leadership team, which will be the director and the 2 assistant directors. At the same concurrent with the governor's announcement of the declaration. So the team is actively working on what are the permanent resources we need to have in place, but what are also some interim or temporary to help support the myriad of needs that we have in the housing and homeless services area. And that concludes my update.
Mr. Carr.
I'll be very brief. I only have 2 things. One, the Ryan Alden criminal trial starts next month on February 7th. So I wanted to let you know, you make inquiries. Of course, it's my advice to make no comment at all on ongoing litigation, particularly criminal litigation. But I just wanted you to be aware of that. And the other thing is I will be out next week. I will be skiing up in Whistler and not watching the meeting.
It'll be a quiz.
Who will be?
Brad Anderson will be here.
Wonderful. Have a really good time skiing. I hope they're great conditions.
Thank you, Chair.
Ms. Diane Taniguchi Dennis.
I'll be quick. Thank you, Chair Harrington, and good afternoon, Board of Clean Water Services. Just 2 items. The first one is on the Clean Water Essentials. I want to thank Chair Harrington for being there on both days and Director Rogers for attending on Saturday. The team felt really great and they were very excited to take part in the Clean Water Essentials. Joe is hosting a tour at Durham this Friday for 2 counselors from Tigard. They got excited and they want to see the facility, and 1 counselor from Beaverton and Mark Ferrara from CWAC, who was there on Thursday, would like to go on the Durham tour. So there's a lot of interest. The team has provided the quick binders that are on your table that we talked about in the learning session. So you could see the strategic plan and the summaries for quick.
Oh, and if I could also have you highlight the Water Reuse Summit.
Oh, so there is a water reuse summit that's being planned on, Mark, do you have the date?
Thursday, June 22nd,
thank
which
you.
happens to be the same week as the NACO Summer Conference in Austin.
So it's a technical session, but they're hoping to garner interest from elected officials to take
And
part.
is this a state thing or a national thing? And aren't you folks hosting?
So it's a statewide for the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, so it's Oregon plus Washington and Idaho, a convening of water reuse.
Local.
And it'll be at Durham. Yeah, so we'll be
It's
hosting.
special
it at
that
Durham.
we're hosting it. And that's why they wanted to try and get it on our radar to at least participate. They're going to get us agendas and things like that. So I haven't decided yet if I'm definitely going to go to the NACO conference or not, but based upon your experience last year, I thought I might. So
I haven't gone to that one either. So, but I think it's important that we stay here as well. So it's
Yeah.
going to be,
Yep.
we should discuss that.
interesting timing. So terrific. Okay. Formal agenda items. Since I forget these, checking in on these, are there any questions with regard to items on the agenda this evening? We have an update on OEICE for the fourth calendar quarter of the year. We have 3 public hearings, an appointment for the Housing Authority, and then that's it. Okay. So without further ado, we're sorry, few minutes, 10 minutes late. We'll get to the funding strategies for the critical facility improvement project. Mr. Munn, welcome. We're learning more. Uh-oh, he's giving me a written spreadsheet. Can you email it, Commissioner Bai, somehow? Or is it exactly what was in our
It's the same.
work session packet?
It's not, it's
No, it's
a
different.
supplemental piece of information.
So Commissioner Fai, you'll just have to make do, sorry.
Laurel's gonna try.
Great.
Laurel's gonna try. So, good afternoon. Chair Harrington, Board of Commissioners. My name is Greg Munn, for the record. I am in the County Finance Department. The supplemental, the handout here was a supplemental that will go within the presentation, and I'll address it as we move forward. Today's topic is funding strategies for critical facility improvement projects. And we'll go through the slides here. We turn the clicker on. There we go. All right, so today's topics are, I want to give you some background and overview of the projects. I know you've seen them before, but do a brief overview. Looking back at the projects, just a refresher of the $48 million in critical facility projects. The paper that I handed out is the list of those 48 million is just arranged differently. That's the purpose of it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we'll review some of our key dates, looking back on this journey that we've been on, and review the funding options as we move forward. And just one thing that would be helpful, I think, is that the funding options are really more of a continuum of options. We could land ultimately in 25 different places along this continuum. So what I'll talk about is one side of that continuum, one pillar to the other, and in between there will be all sorts of options that we could come up with. Okay. And this is just an information only session. I'm not asking for direction or a decision, just to give you as much information as I can in light of the February 7th ARPA conversation, as the options to fund these projects are tied in directly with ARPA. So this is a precursor to that meeting. And then we'll briefly talk about next steps. Okay, so the next 2 plates they're the list of projects in detail that you would have seen back probably in October. It was part of a memo that came from Ms. Angie that described the situation with our facilities. It's high detail, lots of information. I only threw this up here as an example. I don't intend to read through them.
So can I just say, because it comes up with your supplemental, both through, I guess it was the tour that I was on with the mayors recently. They're 2 separate buildings. The law enforcement center is one building. It's been seismically upgraded. And then there's the jail, which I learned was viewed as not needing seismic upgrades because there's so much concrete and steel already there. So as we move forward, I'm just trying to be clear. Are we talking about the buildings as a set? Or are we talking about one building? So law enforcement center is not the jail. So it's a little confusing because I need something consistent.
Okay, so what we can do is Laurel Brown is here. I invite her to show up in case questions like this came up. So I can always ask her to come to the table if we want to go in that direction.
I need consistency. I don't think I'm alone in that. Otherwise, we have the public, you need to call up whoever from your team you need. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. So I recognize that it is confusing and we'll sometimes talk about it as separate buildings or as a single unit. And that is because some of those systems serve both buildings. So,
which I can imagine, but Ms. Angie, could you come up with a nomenclature so we have clarity?
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
Okay, so the handout I gave you, which has two different colored projects listed on it, one of them we're going to call red, but it's more like pink, and the other one's yellow. These, it's the same projects you've seen before, the same $48.7 million. They're just grouped together in two different categories. The red or the pink that's toward the top designate project or systems that have failed. And the yellow, the ones toward the bottom, are designated as imminent failure. So that helps understand the priorities of the projects. The projects in red or in pink, that total 44.8 million of the $48.7 million total. Are so good? Okay. That's the purpose of that handout. I'm going to flip. You've seen, here's just a few projects or a few pictures of the projects, the condition. You've seen probably all of these before, either personally or in pictures, but I thought I would throw these as part of the presentation as well. And here's just a timeline of the background. This adventure we're on started back in August. We've had tours with the CAO's office, the ACA's, myself. There's been briefings with the board and also presentation of the information and tours with city managers and mayors. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, the conversation today, what I'd like to share with you is the options for funding the $48.7 million. And it'll go anywhere from all cash to an all debt scenario or some combination of mix between. But I thought before we moved ahead with that I would give you a few bullet points, information on some of the different sources so that we are at least on the same page when we're talking about them. So the first bullet is ARPA, and generally that's referring to the tranche 2, the $58 million that's part of the ARPA tranche 2. And as you know, these dollars need to be committed by the end of calendar year 24, so in almost 2 years, and spent out within 2 years later by the end of 2026. In terms of debt, there's a couple of instruments that we could use. Full faith and credit, that's FF&C. This doesn't involve a tax increase. It would be debt that we would fund with existing resources. The full faith and credit is essentially we would be loaned money based on the county's credit standing, just like we would personally, or you would personally based on your own personal credit score. The general obligation debt, that would be a voter approved tax increase and would be funded with new revenue. Under gain share, as we talked about, the last gain share update I gave you there's about $2 million, $2.1 million in gain share in the current gain share term that has not been committed by the board yet. So those dollars could be used through FY25 to apply towards this work. I'll also talk about the possibility of extending the gain share program. It hasn't been extended yet, but there's conversation about it. If it was to be extended another 5 years, utilizing the same formula that we have now, there's another source of funds that we could potentially use. grants and earmarks. We're looking into those, the possibility of support either the state or federal level to help us with these projects. The Strategic Investment Program, or SIP, there's $11 million in fund balance that hasn't been allocated as of the end of February, or the end of June, fiscal 22, last June. Just as a reminder that SIP funds to date, they compete with operating expenditure needs in the general fund. And also in a couple of years, we expect a couple of our SIP agreements to sunset, which will cause a declining availability in SIP revenue. The two agreements of the three we have outstanding. And of course, there's the general fund. Our contingency is not fully funded. We will be at about $47 million or not 47, $41 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And our goal eventually will be to get to $57 million in contingency. And reserves, we will be working on a reserve policy, so we don't have any at this point to be able to utilize towards this work. And just as sort of an overall note, as we work through these next couple of options, any increase in debt service at this point would need to be funded by the general fund, which would require a further decrease in general fund expenditures.
Very good. Yeah. Going back to your debt, the GO voter approved, that's a countywide voter approved, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Mhm. And this is just another list of the project that you have a handout of, and we saw earlier. This condenses it down simply into one page. There's no magic about this. 48.7 million. The one thing that is somewhat interesting is you can see the pattern of expenditures needed over the next 4 years to complete that. Some in this year, most in 24 and 25, and then trailing off into 26.
Excuse me for a second. Is this laid out this way because of the fact that it takes time to get contracts in place and execute the projects?
Yes, yes, exactly. The way we're ramping up through 22, 23 as a result of that
Okay.
reality.
This is important for me to understand because back the end of September, when all this surfaced, and I started hearing about it from Ms. Angie, and then the board got up to speed. The reality that I believe I was hit with was if we don't follow up and put a plan together, then we could be in a situation of having to close these buildings. So before we go any further, do you feel that with everything that you have learned over these last few months and the needs, do you think we'll be, as long as we get to it and fund this and support your moving forward, that we'll be able to execute in this manner and avoid having to close these buildings like that?
I do believe that. And
Thank you. That's a huge relief.
yeah.
And
Oh, good.
yeah, and I want to just remind the board that Laura Brown and her team have been directed to proceed up until the contracting. And if we don't have the financing in place, come back so we can even figure out a stopgap approach so that these projects can be moving forward.
Okay.
To
Great.
your point.
Yep, yep. You took me in, eyes wide open, ears wide open. So I appreciate the level of professionalism that's gone into this and figuring out an approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we just have to figure out how to pay for it. Great.
Okay. Can we talk about how you put together this priority thing, or should we just go through the whole slide thing and then we can come back to this?
Are you referring to the pink? and
This
yellow?
slide you're in front
Oh,
of.
this one here?
Yeah, we can stay with this one. It's just, this one here kind of has, the $25 million project and it looks like it's a pretty important project. Obviously, it's HVAC and domestic supply line replacement. It's the biggest price tag on there, but we're 23, 24, 24, 25. So I'm assuming we believe it's going to last that long.
But we're halfway through 22, 23.
Yeah, but the 23, 24 is the 10 million, so we're gonna
Oh,
do that early
yeah, yeah.
on. And then the 24, 25 is the other 10 million. So I'm all for spreading this out. I just don't wanna have, like the chair said, all of a sudden, we have a crisis.
So Commissioner Willie, I think, Ms. Brown, if you can speak to, we have project staging and project execution, and then we have financing strategy. So this is your project staging and execution. So Ms. Brown, can you kind of talk through, and let's pick on the second line, the law enforcement center, HVAC and domestic supply replacement, just because it's a $25 million line.
Sure. And so the way that this is spread out might look like we're staging activities, but really what's happening is that you can only move so quickly. So it's going to take 2 years to complete that project. So we'll start bringing in the construction equipment that we have planned to provide ventilation to the jail while we have part of it shut down, which speaks to Chair's earlier question about, do I feel like we are on the right path to get to these critical issues in time to avoid significant impacts? Part of that is because the construction project itself includes some contingency efforts like auxiliary HVAC units that will come in on large trailer beds that we'll figure out where we're going to put. We are not, we're just beginning, but they will come in and provide air to the jail so that we can start cycling through the pods, and we can't do them all at the same time. So that's why you see that spread over the next 3 years after this current fiscal year.
So there's a construction project management plan behind this, and that management plan is highlighting where the dollars go in those particular years.
That's correct. And to be clear, that's still in development because we're still in design, right? So those details might shift over time, but they will continue to inform the pace at which we expend. So it's tied to that.
After all of these, when we get to the financing, but Greg told me that these were price index. Can you tell me what inflationary factor you use?
Well, yes. So I provided that information to Greg, who may remember it. I always have to check. Thank you. So generally we use 3 to 15%. On this project, I believe we used 5% for escalation. And then we also include an escalator or a contingency line for unforeseen conditions during construction, which I think we included at 10%.
Your vernacular, it might be different than mine. So
Yes.
checking, you're saying from the beginning of this project, if that were approved, to the end, you're only using a 5% indicator, inflationary indicator over 4 years. Good luck.
With the contingency.
Yeah, but I don't know what the contingency is.
10% of the project cost is
500.
is contingency plus, and before that 10%, I believe that's the order we do it in. Before that 10%, we have a 5% escalator.
So you're telling me 10 plus 5 is 15 plus another 5 is 20%? So these are overstated by 20%? If they were
No.
done today?
Overstated, I might not use that
Okay, that was my
terminology,
word,
but
not yours.
that's what's
But
built into.
If you could build it overnight, let's just say, it'd be, would this number be 20% high?
If everything
There
went
was no
exactly as
unforeseen.
Yeah,
planned,
no unforeseen, it was built today. Mysteriously, we had people working around the clock and we did it in 24 hours.
yes, and we
Okay,
never
trying to
encountered a
understand, yeah.
single toe stubber, and we had to continue, we could do everything on today's dollars. That's what would be in there extra at the end.
But is that true of most of these projects?
Well, it's kind of project by project because our project managers are really good at understanding which are more complex and need higher levels of contingency and which will take longer to execute. So they need more escalators in there. So I couldn't speak to that without conferring with my team to find out.
I
how
know
we
the 46 million has about $6 to $8 million additional costs in there for inflation and for.
I think that's fair.
It's about $40 million hit, is what it is with escalators. Okay. All right.
If I could tag on to this, not because I doubt it, but rather we've been hit with, for example, the affordable housing bond through our first 4-year term here, or the first few years of it. with cost escalation, with the cost of steel, concrete, labor, then a lot of discussion in the news about inflation, as well as supply chain difficulties. So what I'll just, and now here's the opine part. I feel comfortable that with your expertise, the three of you, and the consultants that you've brought in, the contractors that you're looking at, and how you've gone about pricing a new HVAC system, and how you've gone through pricing a new roof that will last for 1 decade or more, to whatever standard is best practice, that these feel like real costs to you that will land in when you need to execute that financing. In addition to having that unseen, unforeseen contingency and a 5% as well.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would concur from a financing. As we move forward, we'll continually check back to costing, project costing, and making sure that we have ample funds set aside to make sure we can get the project completed.
Well, my pocket's going to be pretty darned empty at that point. That's what I fear a little bit. That's all.
So if I could assure the board, the questions I've asked Ms. Brown, is this to the best of your professional knowledge for her and her team? Yes. We are presenting numbers here that the county administrator in a budget officer role has not value engineered.
Yeah.
So this is coming from the facilities team to the best of their knowledge, and we're going in to a 26-year-old facility. So there may be some unknowns.
Yep.
And there's contingency. And if that happens, we would be coming back to your board to informing your board as soon as we get that information.
I just want to assume that there will be the
Yes.
unforeseen.
It's a given.
That's all. It's the needing to come back for additional funds that is worrisome. That's all.
Mhm.
So,
That's why I asked it. You're right.
so remind me again, on this version, the red has failed or imminent to fail, and the bottom part is ready to fail? Sorry.
So the red, about the first one,
Yep.
2, 3, 4
Or
projects are failed or in various states of failure. The whole system may not be failing. We may be able
Yep.
to support it. An example would be the Harkins House. We can still cool that building if we bring garden hoses onto the roof to cool the equipment. So it's working, but that's a state of failure in my opinion.
Yep.
So it is red, whereas the shower restoration, the yellow, first
Yep.
yellow one, that one is threatening to fail or will threaten the integrity of the facility
Yep. Thank
in a
you.
very predictable way. I mean, we couldn't pretend that it's not going to happen. It's imminent.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So would you say that this is probably more representative of a priority list?
Yes, I would
Okay.
say that.
And I draw comparison to the slide I have up here, which is just in alphabetical order.
So I think we need to dive in now to this funding side.
Okay, so how do we pay for this? The next, I'm going to skip over, I'm only going to hit the first and the last of these tables because the two options in between, we could come up with many, many options in between. So I really want to just hit the pillars on the outside and talk about one extreme, which would be all debt. That's the first plate. And then the next one I'll talk about is all or mostly all cash that we can afford. So in this example here that you see outlined at the very top of that column in option number 1, you can see the total project cost of $48.7 million. The next grouping of potential cash sources, there's 0. There's no potential cash sources because again, this is an all debt example. About the middle of that column, you'll see $4.1 million. That's the annual debt service to fund the work. That's an estimate that came from our financial advisor. And those payments over 20 years total $82.6 million. So the question is, where over the next 20 years do we come up with $82.6 million?
What's the interest rate? I asked that and you,
It's 5 point,
just a little over 5 anyway.
it's a little over 5. It's all in. It's a TIC. So that includes issuance costs and all of the other costs, bond counsel and all of that involved. And it's a conservative number. They gave us a 1.5% margin for a conservative number. So. All right, so how do we pay for that over the term? We're looking for $82.6 million. The first item under potential debt repayment sources is 2.1 million. That's the residual in our current gain share agreement that could be applied towards this. If we were to move, if we were to have another gain share program similar to the one we're in now, in other words, 5 years, at the same amount of money that we allocated dollars out to some of our operating expenses like we have in the past, which I mean roads and ITS, that would leave about $5 million a year over 5 years. That's where the $25 million comes from. That could be over a 5-year period allocated to pay this debt as well. The last item is ARPA revenue replacement, and I need to take that off because I've learned recently that that's not eligible. We can't use even replacement revenue from ARPA to fund debt service.
Okay.
So that number comes off. With that said, on the screen here, it boils down to essentially the impact on the general fund. The number that I really want you to pay attention to is we would have to go out and debt finance the balance of that through the general fund through a full faith and credit note. And the impact on the general fund on this slide is that 0.6%. But that 0.6% assumes that we have $12 million in ARPA. If we pull the 12 million off, that number goes to 0.8%. So in our budget conversations, we've talked about a 7.1% budget reduction to balance. You would have to add 0.8 to the 7.1.
Yep.
And if the gain share, the next gain share assumption is invalid, then that number would be 1.1% instead of 1.
Yep.
So the bottom line is the general fund has to pick up significant share of the balance of that.
Onward to option 4.
Okay, going to option 4. All right, option 4 is cash. It's not all cash, but the purpose of this exercise was to pool all available cash that we might have that we could utilize in the 4 to 5 year construction and then debt finance anything that was left over that we couldn't fund. So up there, you'll see 2 items for $12 million each for ARPA for 24 million. That's an arbitrary number. And the only reason why it's up there is because that is one of the those are the numbers that you'll end up seeing at our February ARPA update.
Okay.
So they could
So
be,
it has
they could be,
nothing to do with
they could be zero.
eligibility caps or anything.
No, they could be 0. It could be twice that.
Okay, thank you.
But just for purposes of this scenario, I'm showing it 12-12. The 2.1 in gain share, what's remaining, that could apply. If we took 1 year of the next gain share, if it were to happen, that would be $5 million in cash. And the reason why I say of the next, because that falls within the time period of construction, the first 5 years. Now, this is where it's going to take a little bit more explaining. The next line item is $5.9 million, and that's a to be determined amount of cash to find. And the reason why it's 5.9 million is because we only have $20 million left over in that potential gain share to finance the balance. So if you work the numbers backwards and you say 20 million is only going to fund 11.762 million in projects, we have to find another 5.9 million.
But that also
cash.
has the reliance upon there being another gain share.
That's exactly right. That's
Yep.
exactly right.
Okay.
So there's definitely some crystal ball here, but
Yep.
if that was to all happen, then there would be 0% impact on the general fund. And as you're probably thinking now, there's 100 options in between those two. But the point of today was to provide some information and education on where we're at with this and what generally our options are, so that you can think about it in time for the next meeting
Good.
coming up in February.
Well, I'll ask this for February 6th. I'm going to wonder if between what we may have unobligated and this $48 million need, would that second tranche plus the unobligated be able to cover the 48 million? Would that even, I don't even know if that would be eligible per the ARPA rules. So if we
Okay.
could
Yeah,
back.
can I maybe decode that a bit? So what the chair is asking for is the unobligated from tranche one. So not just tranche two, but what's unobligated from tranche one. What can be spent based on Treasury guidance for the critical facilities?
Yeah. It's not to say I want to do it that way. I just need.
This is an option. We're talking options at this time.
And what is that amount?
The tranche two,
No, the unobligated.
they're gonna come
We're-
and tell us.
And that's, we'll know that on February 7th.
Yep.
Cool.
Right.
Chair
Let me throw-
Harrington, I have a
Yeah.
question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Tanya, could you speak to why is it unobligated, or is that gonna be addressed? in
That'll come
February?
to that meeting.
Yeah, Commissioner Fai, I'd suggest we put your question in the parking lot, because my answer is going to lead to additional questions from you and also board members, I'm confident. So we'll make sure we define what obligated and unobligated is relative to ARPA at the February work session.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Rogers.
Wild idea. They don't even have to listen, but I'd like you to play it through before February 6th. Because all of this Justice Center and law enforcement, that's for countywide benefit. That isn't just for us. I mean, that's for everybody. As I recall, I think I asked you this, there's a little over $50 million of ARPA money that hasn't necessarily been committed. I know you don't want to talk about that, but there is. And I know we've got a 24 date that we have to have everything committed by and some spend out. What if we had a wild idea and we took all $48 million out of ARPA? We took and had some interest rate to pay ourselves back. Meaning that, forget the gain share, because I don't know if it's coming again. That would just be a bonus. And so we would pay back that $48 million to the respective funds, wherever, I think you have in a separate fund, at some reasonable interest rate, 2-3%. And so what we would do is, as we took through the years and got money, we would just pay that debt back. So instead of paying 80-some million dollars, of which about 32 or 34, whatever the number comes out, interest to a bank or to investors, we pay it to ourselves at a different rate, so it'd be less, I get it. But we would obligate it for federal purposes, and that's all we got to do. We'd borrow it from ourselves, pay it back to ourselves.
Now, we can certainly do an interfund loan.
Sure.
Yep.
And so then it would be taken care of. I appreciated why I was asking those specific questions on the contingency. It's kind of like building roads. If, what happens if they cost less? Who gets that? Any savings would come back to us, obviously, as a county. It seems like we could do a hybrid and get exactly where we want. Now, some people say, well, why would you take ARPA funds? That doesn't benefit. Heck, it doesn't. I mean, none of the cities have jails. None of the cities have Harkins House. I mean, they're all depending on us to do that, and they should be. So why couldn't we take that 40 million? Just do it. We're not worried, get those contracts out through it, the ARPA fund or whatever you want to call it, pay ourselves back. I'm being redundant. pay ourselves back over some general fund amounts over the years. And so what we have, net the same, except we save money that we, from ourselves.
Could you put that option?
Yeah, we'll put the option. So what will come back with February is clarity of what of the 48 could we use ARPA for under Treasury guidance?
Mhm.
And so we'll come back with that option and what potential options for execution of that.
Then the only other thing I would add in that option was that gain share money would be committed to repay the loan to ourselves. So we'd have that money coming in. So if gain share doesn't come back, then we haven't hurt ourselves. I mean, it was just a source. If it does, it helps pay the debt down. Now, I understand it commits future boards, but these projects are big. I mean, they're gonna take a long time.
And there's probably more coming.
Gain share?
No.
Projects.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
that's the beauty of it in terms of it doesn't obligate future boards to the same degree,
No, not at all.
right? So,
That's my concern, and I appreciate that wild option. So, and I appreciate hearing about it, because one of my concerns is when I look at debt was more interesting to me than taking future revenues. That doesn't mean all the way to the left, but in that middle part.
Sure.
And the reason being is it feels cleaner in terms of what we have to do right now. And as we move forward, instead of obligating future leadership to a portion of their potential revenue.
mhm.
So, this option is really interesting to me as well.
Might be wild, but I just think it would work. We'd get what we need to do. I'd happy to sell to cities on the basis it's their expenditure. And we do need to pay it back. I mean, these funds should be come back to the general fund should be getting monies, paying back into the ARPA, fund, whatever you title it in the future, I don't care.
So paying our self-interest it sounds a little bit like arbitrage, and we're not doing that. So, but we can pay our self-interest.
Oh, there's not arbitrage only occurs if bond issues are there.
Yeah, the
The
state,
time value of money.
Yeah,
But it has to be a security.
yeah, I get that, but
I think state budget law says reasonable rate.
Mhm.
So a reasonable rate is, I mean, one way to say is the amount we're earning in the pool.
Well, that'd be about 191%.
Yeah.
But if you paid 2 or 3, I mean, still it'd be half the payment.
I think the purpose is the intent
That's right.
and the recognition, not necessarily the amount, but
So I'll add, another reason why I like the pursuit of the two options that you've laid out is, well, or part I do like, but don't like. I don't believe in counting your chickens before they hatch. And we don't even have the eggs.
I
Right?
think we have the chickens.
So, we don't have another gain share. So I don't want us to be counting on something that flat out does not exist.
Mhm. Mhm.
It'd be one thing if we were about to have the public hearing and adoption of such a thing, but we don't. And so I think it's a fool's errand for us to be counting on something we don't have. I appreciate your putting it in there as a hopeful option. But to me, it doesn't feel realistic.
But I do like the twist that Commissioner Rogers put on, that any future gain share could be allocated to the repayment process. There, that is not assuming that it's going to be there. It's potential.
Yeah.
Yep, so,
I would say one more thing. In this economy, with this, what's happening, I, for one, would not feel real great about going out for a bond issue right now. And then paying 5%. If we don't have to do it, then we could come up with an alternative.
well, especially in light of the needs for, we've had some discussions already about expanded new courthouse, expanded jail capacity.
Well, even the
Let alone
continuation of ESPD and some of the other things that we will look to depend on, I think
Yeah.
when we go out for a levy, that impacts what our other opportunities have been and the needs stay
Yeah,
the same.
we're still trying to get the capital investment gap closed. And making sure that we're well positioned for the operations of that. So we don't want to oversubscribe all of our tools, all of our financing tools, because there are needs ahead. This is very helpful for me. And I will certainly learn more February 7th, but I feel like we've got to get this figured out. PDQ pretty darn quick in February, March.
And the communication around what the needs are has been held with our municipalities, correct?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
that's
I
why
just want to make sure that
we had
all-
a
yeah, and
jail
through the-
hosted tour. I had gone over it with our mayors. Happy to,
And I guess I wasn't
like that.
so much asking you, thank you, but I was really asking the city managers and
oh, yeah, yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
just
the
want-
city managers in addition to the police chiefs.
It's great. Okay. That's just such an important piece as we move forward.
We try to have some things in tandem.
And you do a great
those.
job at that. I just wanted to make sure that it was brought
Yeah,
forward that
yeah.
that's
That's great. Happy. Glad you asked. Keep asking
happening.
so we don't forget. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Keep up the good work. Really appreciate what you're doing.
And I want to thank you for the pre-work that you did with me, and I assume others as well, that really allowed me to be able to look at this and be clear about what my thoughts were.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So we're going to take a break. And do you want a 15-minute break or a shorter break? The next item doesn't, it's supposed to just be a half an hour.
Is Comey ready if we'd be a little bit earlier than 4 o'clock is what we're
Oh,
scheduled for the
yeah,
next one.
you're right.
So is Comey ready, ready, or is he expecting 4 o'clock?
I would suggest we take a break.
The 15-minute
see-
break.
Okay,
We'll
let's
see
do
you at 5:04.
It works.
Terrific. Thank you. This is probably, that topic is probably one of
That's a good definition. I hadn't thought in terms of that. Are you ready there, sir?
We are ready.
So Comey, did you hear our thank you earlier today?
Oh, that was so hard. It was so touching. Thank you all. I appreciate it. Oh, same here. Feeling is mutual.
But you will find a ball and chain that we've installed at your desk.
It'll be foam.
It's
It'll be all your favorite colors.
got a fuzzy lining.
Yeah. Change is the only thing. It's constant. So it's my turn.
Okay, well, welcome back. Commissioner Rogers will join us shortly. So, hello, Andrew. Hello, Comey.
Yeah, first I'd like to introduce Andrew Compton, our new development manager, the new Shannon, so to speak.
Thank you very much.
That I
He doesn't. Well,
got
good
some shoes to follow there.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. So I'm Comey Calavo, Housing Director, and with me is
I'm Andrew Crampton, Development Manager.
all right. So we are here to discuss the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. And so this slide is just trying to see where we are now. We've spent about 89% of the 116 million we were allocated. And so we are on course to meet or exceed all the goals. We have just about 2 units to go on the overall, 7 units to go on the 2 bedrooms, and 14 for the extremely low income. The extremely low income is obviously the hardest. And we are talking with our partners, and we have no concern that we'll meet all the goals.
Can we then go borrow some of Multnomah County's money if they haven't done theirs?
We certainly, and Andrew will share this later on in the program. We have 48 million in applications for the 13 million we have left. So yes, if Multnomah is willing,
Wow.
we are happy to.
Please let Metro know.
Yes, well, we got lucky because we jumped in early. Interest rates were low. We decided, this was the right environment to go aggressive. And with the support of county administration, we did our first NOFA, was big, and the prices are going up. You'll be amazed what it's costing nowadays to build this apartment.
So a smaller bouquet, but more expensive flowers.
More expensive flower, exactly.
I'd like to correct you, though. You said we got lucky, and I don't believe that that's the case at all. I think it was.
You were intentional.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Part of it, yeah. We had big discussions.
One of the questions, may I ask a question now?
Mhm.
If you go back to that slide, what does it look like with the governor's statement about 36,000
of all types?
Yeah, I'm just curious how, in relationship to how hard it was to get here.
Right.
That's, I just wanted to be thinking about the future.
Right.
You don't have to answer that question right now, but I
Well,
do
I
think
could try.
we should be aware. Oh, please.
Right. So they have corrected that they are hoping the private sector will do half of that.
Okay,
So
18,000.
so it'd be about, yes,
But
36,000 a year,
But still 18,000 a year for
for the whole state.
on
the
the
whole s-
public? Oh, for the whole state.
So the private
Yeah,
sector
yeah.
would take 18,000.
Yeah, but even at
What approximately what increase do you think that is over what we've done here?
Well, I'm trying not to speculate, but this was 653 million. The goal was 3,900 units. So if you use the same math, you're gonna be needing a good 2.5 billion.
5 times more at least.
Yeah,
6
to
times.
do the 18,000, and that's just in gap financing. The total cost will be,
A year.
correct.
In 1 year, yeah.
Somebody
Thank
didn't
you.
do the math before the governor announced that.
I just wanted to gain perspective on that, so I appreciate it.
Well, no, we have a big audacious goal because there's a big audacious need,
That's-
right? It's based on need. achieving it is a different one.
Maybe the state can borrow money from themselves like we're gonna do.
Well, and we're going to further investigate.
Always
Options.
looking at options.
That's right. Thank you for helping us learn along the way, Kobe.
Oh, glad to be a part. So Andrew, you wanna?
Good afternoon. My name is Andrew Crampton, Development Manager with Washington County. I'm here today to talk about the process for the 2020 Metro Housing Bond NOFA. This was the remaining $13 million in bond funds. Just a couple date components to establish timeline. The NOFA was released in late summer of 2022. Couple things that the NOFA called for based on the analysis that was done in the previous slide as far as available units and unit type. The first was looking at a higher percentage of deeply affordable units. And then also in conjunction with that, looking at a higher percentage of 2 or more bedroom units, really focusing on 3 or 4 bedroom units. And then finally looking for projects that included permanent supportive housing units. These were some of the goals to establish competitive criteria for scoring for the applications, and applications were due in October. To set the context for the review process when applications were received is staff performed a threshold review to make sure each application submitted materials that were required for analysis, including financial pro forma, programming mix, and development team summaries. Then an underwriting review was performed by a third-party financial consultant on each application to make sure that the applications fulfilled industry standard underwriting criteria. The review committee, which was composed of Housing Advisory Committee volunteers or Washington County staff, all whom had affordable housing expertise, was convened to review the applications. The review committee met to discuss questions and share perceptions after they reviewed all of the applications and third-party financial analysis underwriting criteria. After the discussion on questions and perceptions, review committee members then individually provided rankings of each application. Staff tabulated the scores to create an average score for each application. The scoring criteria to determine the scoring is above. As you can see in the chart, items like financial feasibility, location, target population, advancing racial equity, developer capacity, and readiness to proceed. These scoring.
And if I may real quickly, the advancing racial equity, 2 years ago, the score was 10 points. And the county auditor, through his audit, recommended that we beef up that area. So we doubled it for this particular one. And if you recall, he said we were not specific enough in the narrative. And we argued back that we had doubled the score and that was complying with his, anyway, that's that.
Has that been productive to double that scoring in your mind?
The advancing racial equity was 10 points in 2020, and then for this one, we were 20 because the auditor said we didn't sufficiently emphasize that category.
Okay.
Of culturally based, community-based, culturally specific providers.
Okay.
So where did you take the extra 10 away from?
We took it from all the other categories.
Kind of a reallocation.
Reallocation, yeah.
By 5 points each or something, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, you may have only had 10 points when you did the contracts, but the way that I've heard, at least, the community engagement with things like the Somali Circle, with Viewfinder and others, you certainly delivered.
We had extensive community engagement. We had Piano Stars in doing one project in Cornelius, and many others. And then we have a minority general contractor on Goldcrest.
Yep.
So we are out there talking to people, getting them involved. So
good work.
I wanted to mention that we are being responsive to the audit.
Yep. Thank you.
5 applications were received in October, and the chart above shows the project names generally, project sponsor, developer, units, Metro Housing Bond funding request, and then the overall total project cost.
Can you tell me, I can guess where at least 2 or 3 of those are. Can you tell me generally where they're at?
Woodland Hearth is in Tigard. Dartmouth Crossing also in Tigard. Hawks Landing, the proposal is from Tualatin. 72nd is Tualatin, and then Just Compassion is also in Tigard.
Yeah, 3 in Tiger, 2 in 12.
4 in Tiger. And what,
3 and 2, yeah. 3 out of the 5.
3 and what's the?
Here, that's right here. 3 are located
Oh, I
in
should
Tiger
get
and
that.
2 and 12.
Oh,
And one thing I will add is I will walk through each project with some of the details next with.
I was gonna ask you a question when I read that earlier. I'm sorry, I forgot that, but it doesn't seem like we have a very good dispersion of units throughout the county.
Well, but we do.
Yeah.
I think we,
Well, the first round, we got very good geographic dispersal.
but I mean, for this.
This round, well,
this round.
13 million was not, yeah.
Yeah, for just this round. I'm not talking about earlier. Yeah. Just seems like, I'm not complaining. I'm just saying this doesn't seem fair when you have, I know, big needs in Beaverton and elsewhere. Yeah,
South County has needs too.
it does, but I don't want to be piggish.
You're not. It's a whole portfolio. And remember, they told us, even though there was more, be in the northern part, north and west, and then central, we're now with these covering more to the south.
So you think it will be balanced? Okay.
Yeah.
I just looking at this one and I knew that we had earlier, I didn't remember all the numbers. I thought, oh, we're being piggish here. Yeah, okay. All right, we like to be hogs. We'll take it all.
In each slide moving forward, we'll walk through quickly the project applications with pertinent information. The first project that scored highest was Woodland Hearth, which was sponsored by Community Partners for Affordable Housing. Projects located in Tigard in 63 units. Some of the components that you'll see in black were items identified by the Revaluation Review Committee as project strengths, and items in red were project either weaknesses or considerations components with scoring criteria. The Woodland Hearth application had the highest percentage of family size units, deeply affordable, had many financing resources secured, had an experienced development team and quality narratives as well. Some of the components for consideration is it was the 3rd largest number of units, so not necessarily the largest project. And it is located in Tigard. Tualatin did have a location preference to look at South County as a provider for affordable housing. And so had a little bit lower location preference. That location preference was informed by the local implementation strategy for disbursement for housing across the region. The next project, which is unanimously rated second by review committee members. So each review committee member evaluated Woodland Hearth as the first scoring application and Dartmouth Crossing as the second scoring application. This project had 2nd largest number of units, high percentages of permanent supportive housing, including a developer with experience with permanent supportive housing projects, and a quality pro forma that performed well with financial underwriting. Some of the components that were disadvantages is it did have the 3rd highest percentage of family size units, less 3 to 4 bedrooms, and still had a need to secure a lot of the competitive funding sources. And then as well was located in Tigard. The third ranked project is Hawks Landing that had 90 units. It was the largest project. Had experienced developer and really interesting partnerships with nonprofit providers. It was located in Tualatin, so had the highest locational scoring criteria based on the NOFA, and did have a slightly lower bond request per unit. Some of the components that were disadvantages is it did have the highest total development cost per unit. Many funding sources that are competitive had to be secured, And there's some concerns with the debt coverage ratio of expected debt that was assumed for the project was slightly lower than the NOFA requirements. The fourth ranked project was a project sponsored by Stewardship Development and had 72 units. Some of the advantages were a slightly lower bond request and interesting creative partnerships with nonprofit service providers. This is a developer that's newer in comparison to the other project sponsors to LIHTC funded projects. And based on financial underwriting of comparable projects in the region, did seem that total development cost wasn't consistent with the standard industry standards for overall cost. And many competitive financing sources still needed to be secured. The fifth place project is a very interesting application by Just Compassion to provide permanent supportive housing units in conjunction with an overarching shelter facility. Definitely, as we know with permanent supportive housing, this is a very high needs population. That was an advantage of the application to meet that need. And this entity is a very skilled service provider, especially through sheltering resources. The application didn't provide family-size units due to the unique permanent supportive housing use, and is new to affordable housing ownership and management. Extensive sheltering experience, but didn't have experience specifically with housing specifically. The co-location with the service center raised both development and operational concerns about being able to finance a particular component of an overarching project that doesn't pair well with the low-income housing tax credit program and eligible costs. Another requirement of the application is that there was the need in order to fulfill a funding gap for a capital campaign. This is a very unique project, but it doesn't necessarily pair well with the practices in the low-income housing tax credit program, especially with eligible costs having a mixture with an overarching shelter. And the review committee felt that this was a really great, high-quality project, but because of those limitations, it didn't really fit well with the funding intent of the NOFA, which is to leverage low-income housing tax credit and permanent debt in conjunction with public subsidy.
So before we get into this slide, I want to mention that we did discuss this with the Housing Advisory Committee. They had a meeting after the HAC forum on Friday. And so we have incorporated many of their recommendations into this. So
I'm not 100% clear in terms of, given these 5 applications and all that you've enumerated around each one of them, if you're still recommending that we move forward with all 5 or just with the first 2 with more to come on the remaining 3?
yes, so that we'll get into that in a second.
Okay.
So we have, yes, go ahead.
Can I just ask a question about the last project? Could you put that one back up? I believe this is the one that Commissioner Willie and I had a presentation on, and
yeah, and I have a tour on Friday.
yeah, and I thought, and please correct me if this is the interpretation I had, that those 16 units were built over the service centers, and that I thought that they were more transitional units that would be for a year to 2 years.
Right.
Is that the correct?
That is correct. So this project also
Is that
applies.
one reason why it doesn't fit in as well?
Right, yeah, because affordable housing is long-term, and long-term is a lease of 6 months or more.
Yeah.
You also have insurance requirements, and then, I mean, ideally, this should be built without debt. So they have applied for the SHS dollars in a subsequent request for information after this one. So that is being reviewed as we speak.
I think that we're saying the same thing. It seems like it's a really good project. It's a very specific niche, but what I think I'm hearing you say is that niche is not what this money was intended to do.
So for this solicitation, they'll be more competitive with the SHS request.
Thank you.
And it's being processed through, we are going through the review process as we speak. So we have 13 million. The top scoring development requested 9.4 million, and the recommend for your consideration is that we fund Woodland Herb in the full amount that they have requested. So, and then on the third one, we obviously we want to align some of our PSH, the extremely low income housing, with SHS. So what we are proposing here is to have a conversation with the second highest scoring about increasing permanent supportive units in return for the balance of the funding, which is 3.5, and maybe some SHS dollars. And if, depending on how those negotiations go, we would talk to the third place and the fourth place. And
What
so,
happened to the second place?
the second place, we've already started a conversation with them. We'll start with them
Okay,
and then see how it goes. But what that would mean is SHS funding, which was not advertised in this particular solicitation. So we've had conversations with Jackie, who is our counsel. She's in there about how we have to be carefully structuring this going forward. We advertised 13 million.
Yep.
And with this proposal for your consideration, we could be adding more dollars from a different source with different requirements. We've checked in with procurement, county procurement. They have given us a go-ahead. They think we are in the clear because the original solicitation stated the purpose and we are not deviating from that.
so I'm a little slow on this one.
Yeah.
Because I read the memo in the packet. The slides are new here, so I didn't.
Mhm.
So what I really appreciate is that you and the committee, the review committee, and your HEC discussions as well. You've reviewed each of these 5. There are pluses and minuses, if I use that, or weaknesses, strengths and weaknesses. And what I'm failing, it seems very clear that the number one, the Woodland Heart, you can move forward with. And where I'm still stuck is, given all the black and the red for each one of 2, 3, 4, and 5, if you think there's really something viable there that can be worked through, and that's what your last 2 bullets are getting at,
Mhm.
or if those are insurmountable.
Honestly, they are all viable.
Okay,
Those, we could go back. These can all be mitigated.
okay.
All the red can be mitigated. Obviously, the cost per unit, which, we are, I started in this business when 150,000 per unit was, and now we are pushing 500. So very scary, but the question becomes, what do you take out? You take out air conditioning now that we have a heat dome event.
Right.
What about durable materials? Always use cheaper materials that will last 10 years. But
No.
you want long-term affordability. So yeah, we leave that to the engineers and the architects. We're also involved, but we can mitigate all of these concerns.
It just takes more time and
It takes more time and it takes expertise of the development team and the lawyers and the engineers and on and so forth.
And given your level of expertise, the 3 of you on the team plus legal as well, so these 4 subject matter experts that are before me,
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you want me to also understand that it's continuing to pursue these areas that can be mitigated is a valuable pursuit versus just only moving forward with one and starting over and doing something completely different.
Yeah, well, if we had more funding, yes, the the jazz compression one it'd be good to fund those without any debt. Similar to what we are doing with our lower end because of the population we are trying to serve. This is, very needy population and we're seeing a rise in insurance rates already from all this population. So the rest of them, we can work with them to mitigate all the shortcomings that were noted. So if funding was no problem, we'll probably have 4 or 5 new developments in Washington County, but because we are limited, this is our proposal
Okay.
with HAC, Housing Advisory Committee input.
Can I have a question? And this is, I'm supportive of you moving ahead on this, but I did kind of do some quick math on all of those proposals and I think they're all 150,000 except for this last one you showed us was 144,000, but you critiqued it as the development costs were too high. So I'm trying, I was wondering what am I missing in the measurement of that evaluation?
Oh, so the amount they're applying for us is just the gap. Yeah, they're going to be leveraging these resources with bonds and tax credits and debt. So the 150,000 a unit is gap. The total cost is,
okay,
450.
Oh, I see.
And thereabouts, correct.
All right.
This is the public sector providing gap financing to enable these things to go forward that would otherwise not happen.
Well, I got that part.
Yeah.
It was the cost per unit that I misunderstood what
Total
you were
cost per
saying
unit.
there. So, okay. All right.
Still stuns me, 400,000 to 500,000, you can build a stick house. Unbelievable.
We're seeing more and more requirements for air conditioning, durability, long-term
Healthy families never cheap.
healthy buildings. Build them cheaper, but they'd be moldy in a decade, that kind of deal. So, I mean, if the cost troubles a lot of people, including policymakers like yourselves, but of course, the alternatives may be worse.
We saw the rehabilitation costs too at that tour.
We need to go into building business in addition.
Good luck finding the work.
No, thank you.
We got 4 of us here, we can all solve the hammer.
Oh, yeah, right. It's a very light hammer. It doesn't require repeated use. I don't have to be out in cold, wet weather.
Electric one, only in the summer.
Yeah. So my point is, no can do. So.
Well, there's work at the state level about cost escalation and how to reduce it. I mean, I have experience in more than one continent and building technology is very high here in the United States. It's a good thing to have buildings that are highly, engineered and built, but then it costs more. Yeah, pay for it.
Let's say something. I just heard that you're going to do something silly and retire at a very young age. I've known you. I have known you since you got to the county, and you have been just outstanding. And you and I had a conversation when we were meeting over at the Pillsbury building, and they selected somebody originally for the position before you, and then came back to you, and I said that was a mistake. You probably recall the conversation we had out in the hall. You have just been a godsend to the.
This is not his retirement party.
Well, I
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Come on.
Well, we're all getting,
You might be trying to talk him out of this.
I might be drop over tomorrow. Why, good, then don't retire.
Thank you. So,
Well,
Thank you.
thank you all.
this is an example of how you help me have my eyes wide open, ensuring that we're being responsible as a public agency, but you're helping me be brave and lean in. And I appreciate that due diligence, right? It's many, many hands. But so to your questions, commissioners, are we comfortable with the first, there's the process.
Yep.
Really thumbs up on that. Then there's a clear recommendation of moving forward with the Woodland Hearth project. And they're asking us about willingness to move forward to look into the alignment with the SHS capital funding sources for the second project and go through the negotiations with third, fourth, fifth.
2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Yep.
All good.
Mhm.
Yep.
Oh.
Will there be some action that comes forward to us?
Yes, we'll be coming back for action and with the line out the process. Concept endorsement, metro, all of that good stuff when we come back.
Yep,
Mhm.
yep. And I'm a big one for cheering and not just cheering, but telling the public what we're doing at those various steps, because it's been a very significant voter bond effort. But especially with that fun, occasionally I want to highlight the concept endorsement, right? Before the full funding is there, the groundbreaking, the grand opening. So please know that you have a very attentive board, and we want to make sure that our public knows of the good work that you're following through on in partnership with others. So we appreciate all of it.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yeah, keep
Thank
up
you.
the good work. We're meeting a lot of important community need. Thank you for joining us. So, Commissioners, I had asked Daniel to help me understand the portfolio as it was rolling out and what kind of timeframes might be the grand opening. And so he gave me a chart. I don't know if you have this, so it's a chart of all the affordable housing.
Oh, thank you.
So there are various grand openings that are scheduled out through the different months of this year. So I'll ask Daniel, I might have said Andrew in there.
No, you said Daniel.
Okay,
Um,
so,
So as long as it goes to Megan.
yeah,
Yeah.
just share it with Megan and
Yeah.
Megan will
yeah.
certainly
I
walk
get
us through
to-
that.
Yeah,
I think we all try to get those on our calendars.
Yep.
That they're important, that we do try to get to those.
yep. But as much as I advocate for you using your vacation time, if you decide to target a whole particular month, that would keep you from attending some of these. So that's why.
Oh, if you go on vacation for a month?
Yeah, or, you know, I'm being a little facetious.
Yeah,
None of you have done that yet,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure you have some advance
Mhm.
notice for the opportunity, that's all. So, and, you know, then the similar table on the regulated affordable housing that is coming off of those 30-year affordability timeframes. Yeah, yeah. So, cool.
Do we, could I ask a question about the meeting tonight?
Oh, no, not at all. Of
Yeah,
course.
please. Do we know what how many people have signed up for testimony?
So
We've received a number of letters. I've read those.
so far, we've received 2 signups that I have for tonight. One on ordinance 882, one on ordinance 889, and then we'll have one for the opening 2-minute comment, but I would expect there'll be some more people to come in person or be online for ordinance 882.
That's what I thought. I'm just trying to think about.
And Mr. Carr, if I could check in with you for a minute, I have a logistics question around one of the public hearings. So glad to have the opportunity to check in with you. Great. Has anything come up leadership wise? Nope. Well, then we'll see everyone at 6:30 p.m. Have a good dinner.